I'd like to invite Dr. Catherine Michel up to speak with us. She's a professor of nutrition and associate dean of education, School of Veterinary Medicine at the University of Pennsylvania, and her presentation will be the Evolving Human-Animal Bond, One Health Implications.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So what I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to try to make the case that the increasing number of dogs and cats, pet dogs and cats, and our evolving relationship with these animals actually has implications for health, both companion animals, so pet dogs and cats, diet and food, both companion animal dogs and cats and people, I should say, diet and food, and our environment. So I'd like to start out with a little bit of background, and then I'll give a couple of examples to make my case. So the first thing that I'd like to talk about is that dogs and cats are carnivores phylogenetically. Okay, that is a classification based on their evolution from a common ancestor. But in fact, biologically, this order Carnivora really runs the gamut. So I was making the point that this is a diverse order, and there are species that range from the cat, which is an obligate carnivore, so actually has nutritional requirements for nutrients that are only found in animal tissues, like taurine or retinol, vitamin A. But if you look over here, we've got all of these omnivores, the domestic dog, bears, raccoons. These are species that can obtain their essential nutrients from a wide variety of foods, including plant-based foods. And I just have to point out that we even have the panda bear somehow snuck into the order Carnivora, which is, as an adult, an herbivore. So it's a confusion for people who, when they hear carnivore, they think meat eater, but in fact, biologically, these animals differ in their requirements. So there's just some statistics to show how many dogs and cats we have in the US alone. There are probably over 39% of households that have dogs and 25% of households that have at least one cat. And as I said, our relationship with these animals is changing. When these animals were first domesticated, it was as working animals. It was to eliminate vermin or to protect or herd our flocks or help hunt. Now we think of them as members of our family. You know, the typical response is, this is, you know, I want to treat this pet like I would treat my children. We call them children in fur coats. And I like this, this particular statistic that 3 out of 4 dog owners celebrate their pet's birthday. Now, one of the things that goes along with this increasing human-animal bond is how we want to feed our pets. If we think of them as children, we're going to want to feed them the way we feed our family. And the pet food industry is growing by leaps and bounds. These are the most recent figures that I could find. And one of the probably most rapidly increasing shares of the pet food market is the natural foods market. And just to underline how we want to indulge our pets, the most rapidly growing segment of the market for decades now has been the treat market. And last year, people spent upwards of $4.5 billion on pet treats. So, how does this play out in terms of health? Well, just like with people, we have an obesity epidemic in pets. This is a recent statistic from Banfield, which is a big corporate veterinary practice. 1 in 3 cats or dogs are overweight. And this statistic doesn't tell the whole problem because that includes all dogs and cats. If you look at just adult dogs and cats, so if we exclude the very young and also the old, frail dogs and cats, what we see is that statistic being over 50% of our pet dogs and cats for those middle-aged animals. And this is a global problem, as you can see data from all around the world. So I'd just like to make a plug. Oh, well, before I get to that, I'm just going to say that the implications, as you've just been hearing about people, the implications for pets are the same. There are real health risks of being overweight. Increased risk of orthopedic disease in both dogs and cats. In cats, overweight cats are more than 6 times more likely to develop diabetes mellitus than cats at a healthy weight. Dogs, by the way, have a very different pathogenesis for diabetes, more like type 1 diabetes. And we've seen in both dogs and cats that there is reduced lifespan if they're overweight. The most recent data across many dog breeds suggests that the lifespan of overweight dogs is about 2 years less than dogs that maintain a healthy weight. So to get on to my plug, I would like us to be able to exploit this human-animal bond, and also, the fact that dogs and cats share our environment. They are basically share many of the same risk factors that we do for diseases. So they really can serve as models of disease for, addressing some major challenges and unanswered questions. For example, understanding the true causes of obesity. This is not simply a matter of lack of willpower on the part of individuals, or in the case of pets, their caregiver. We need to find successful strategies for long-term maintenance of weight loss. We have successful strategies for weight loss, but recidivism is really high. And then, of course, the Holy Grail is to find a way to prevent obesity in the first place. So by doing comparative and translational research, using dogs and cats in clinical trials, we potentially could start to answer some of these fundamental questions regarding the biology and the behavioral causes of obesity. And we also might be able to run clinical trials to evaluate interventions. And here's just one example of work that has been done looking at a way to exploit this human-animal bond to motivate overweight people and overweight pets to engage in more physical activity. So the next example I would like to use is how human food trends can influence in pet food product innovation. And I've just listed some of the more recent trends that we've seen in pet foods. I've already mentioned natural pet foods. Functional ingredients. So you can get a heart-healthy breakfast cereal. Well, for your cat, you can get a cat food that helps maintain urinary tract health or prevent hairballs. We're starting to see clean label claims in the pet food industry, and some pet food companies are even marketing themselves based on some of the things that they're doing to promote sustainability. However, one of the big trends that we have seen recently in the pet food industry is grain-free diets. So, often pet owners don't recognize that dogs and cats, like other species, need specific ingredients, specific nutrients, not specific ingredients in their foods. And I'm not sure where this grain-free trend started. I think some of it was consumer-driven. So again, trends like the Atkins diet, paleo diet, or more recently, looking for gluten-free alternatives. But also, it's definitely a result of industry marketing. So it has had some unintended consequences. It's definitely true that we can create pet foods out of a wide variety of ingredients, including plant-based proteins. As I'm sure everybody in this audience knows, that the energy input to create animal-based proteins is considerably more than grain-based proteins. And I'll say more about this in a little bit. But about a year ago, veterinarians started recognizing that we were seeing increasing numbers of dogs presenting with a condition called dilated cardiomyopathy, which is a heart disease that can result in heart failure and death. Now, this is not a very common problem in dogs. It's definitely a problem in certain breeds. It has a genetic tendency in certain breeds. But we were seeing it in all breeds. So the FDA took a look, and they just last month released the results of a preliminary investigation where they reviewed 321 cases of dilated cardiomyopathy in dogs. And in 192 of these cases, they had very good diet histories on the dog, and the dogs had eaten one diet pretty much exclusively for a period of time. When they looked at those diets, 92% of them were dry dog foods, 90% of them were grain-free, the others were vegan or contained brown rice. And this is a very fascinating, complex problem, and I can't go into all the pathophysiology now, but a large proportion of these foods contained peas, and many of them also lentils, so 92%. These are ingredients that we don't have a lot of experience using in pet foods. And we really don't understand what the link is here between this disease in dogs and the presence of these ingredients. But there clearly is an association, and this is an unintended consequence of making a switch based on just a food trend in how we formulate foods for dogs. So the last topic that I want to touch on briefly is sustainability. So the way that the pet food industry can have an impact on our environment. And the example that I would like to use are byproducts in pet foods. So another hot button topic for consumers. So a byproduct is simply a secondary product that's produced in addition to the principal product. And the truth of the matter is that with the human food industry, the way it is today, there are many, many byproducts that are produced in the production of human foods. And hundreds of these byproducts are used in the animal feed industry, which includes pet food manufacturing. And just some examples of some common byproducts that are used in pet foods, brewer's rice and organ meats. And that's the one that gets people concerned. So, organ meats are actually a very, in general, a very good source of high quality protein and other nutrients. However, in our society, at least in the US, we don't use these in our, it's not the kind of food that we use to feed our family on a day-to-day basis. In fact, a lot of people think they're disgusting or even inedible. And as we become, as our relationship with our pets changes and we think of them as family members, it's not surprising that people think that they're not suitable ingredients in pet foods. And I have to confess that the pet food companies, or the pet food industry, has marketed this concept to people in a lot of cases. However, I would like to also point out that using byproducts in pet food manufacturing actually lightens the burden of the human food system in a number of ways. First of all, another trend that we're seeing in the pet food industry is the desire for human-grade ingredients in pet foods. I mean, just think about the impact if we start producing animal protein specifically to feed companion animals. And the other thing is if we don't use animal byproducts in the manufacturing of pet foods, that's probably another 4 million tons of waste in landfills every year. So there's a lot of things that pet food companies can do that could have an impact on sustainability. You know, and as I was just speaking about, we could, you know, they could choose more sustainable ingredients to use in the manufacture of their foods. Another thing that they could do is they could formulate foods to contain nutrient content that was adequate to meet animals' needs and not in excess of it. I have to say that there are a lot of pet foods out there that contain protein in excess of what's really necessary. They could source their ingredients and supplies from companies that integrate sustainability and efforts into their work streams. Really important, we could educate consumers about the benefits of formulating pet foods using byproducts. And we could also address pet obesity, thereby both having an impact on animal health and well-being, as well as decreasing the amount of calories that pet food companies have to produce. So that's pretty much what I have to talk about this morning. I'd just like to introduce you to my best friend, Dobby.